Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be discussing the Macario Garcia Washed Mexico from Sweet Bloom. So here's the bag of this one. We got another Washed Mexico. This one's from Oaxaca. Now this one was featured, of course, in the blind taste test video, and it was part of my shipment along with the Nicaragua and the Chiapas Mexico. There are videos on both of those coffees as well as that blind taste test if you want to take a look at how it compared to those. But we're kind of here to discuss this coffee. There's not too much more I need to say about Sweet Bloom. There are tons of videos on that as well. So I'm going to dive straight into discussing this coffee. Now, day 6, it was a very distinct pear, and it was a very nice kind of sweet pear. And it was day 8 that it became a very lovely blackberry taste. Still a very, very sweet cup of coffee. And I have it brewed right here. This is day 16 of this coffee. Day 9, it wasn't quite as sweet, but it was very honey forward, and there was some pear sweetness coming through more so than any sort of blackberry for me. Day 10, even more acidity that was coming through, and as it was cooling, it became even more honey forward. It was very, very honey forward. And then day 12, it just was straight honey with a lot of acidity coming from the blackberries and the pear, but still the pear was a little bit more prominent. Day 12 is when I made my tasting wheel. And I started kind of experimenting around with this coffee a little more because I noticed it started out, it was an interesting coffee. It started out pear, blackberry, honey, very honey, and then kind of like a little bit of a mix between them. But it seemed like the honey had its little peak early, whereas the blackberry had its peak a little early. And then it became more of a honey coffee, and now it's still, to this day, it's very, very honey. At day 16, I'm getting more honey than anything else still. And when I say experimenting, kind of playing around with this coffee, I did put it through this was made through my automatic Bonavita coffee maker. I felt like when I was putting it through the Chemex, the thing that was still kind of coming through the most was the honey. And I was trying to see if I could get maybe some of the darker things to come out, like the blackberry, but it wasn't. I think that for whatever reason, this was just kind of early in the coffee that the blackberry was really prominent. From here on out, all I can really get out of this, no matter how I brew it, is honey. So that was just kind of interesting to me. And now I'm going to go ahead and put up the tasting wheel. And what you'll see from this tasting wheel is the parts that are the highest are at the very top. The finish, the sweetness, and the acidity. Towards the end, especially when I made this tasting wheel, this coffee was highly acidic, and this was being put through the Bonavita. And I kind of wonder if maybe I would have continued with the Chemex if it might have lowered that acidity, but that still was very prominent, probably the most notable thing. I contemplated even putting it at the highest mark of Mark 5 for that, but I still just kind of left it in that 4, that spot. Still had some very high sweetness, a very good honey sweetness, and that lingering finish. But nothing else really peaked high in this chart. And we kind of look at the fruit aspect of it, and interestingly, berry fruit, blackberries are actually listed more as a stone fruit than they are berry fruit. And pear apparently doesn't really fit into stone, citrus, or berry fruit in any of those categories, but I don't think it really mattered because it wasn't the most fruity coffee in the world anyway, so I felt like I couldn't put any of these coffees overly high to begin with, so like in any of those fruit categories. But overall, I think this might be a little bit more what I'm expecting from a Mexico. I think that there's just something a little different about this coffee compared to the other two. The other two Sweet Blooms I felt like were a little more complex, whereas this one started out a little more complex, but became a little more, I don't want to say one-dimensional because Sweet Bloom coffees tend to be a little more unique and different, but for me, I just couldn't figure out how to get something different from it. And I think the type of person that I'm going to suggest this sort of coffee to is obviously somebody that really likes honey, but I think something that might be a little bit more of a challenge, something that maybe if you put in an espresso machine, if you run through an AeroPress, run through a French press, see if you can just kind of get something different from it, because I still can't for the life of me figure out why it became something that I couldn't really get right. And of course it's a Sweet Bloom coffee, so of course it was great, and you know, I have no complaints about it. It was a very interesting experience, and I'm glad that I got to try both of these Mexicos from Sweet Bloom. But I think I'm going to leave it at that. And if you liked this video, then of course go ahead and like, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. If you've tried this coffee as well, you were able to get something different from it, then go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what you thought. But this right here has been a discussion of the Macario Garcia Washed Mexico from Sweet Bloom. Thank you for watching.